March 30th, 1981, 2:27 p.m., outside the Washington Hilton, 6 shots in 1.7 seconds. The President of the United States is on the ground. The bullet stops 1 inch short of his heart. 4 U.S. presidents have been killed in office. At least 16 others have been shot at, and 6 were hit. The job comes with the world's largest target on its back. Some attempts are famous: Lincoln, Kennedy, Reagan. Some are forgotten. A future president was shot in the chest in Milwaukee and gave an 84-minute speech afterward. A sitting president was attacked at his front door in Washington. 2 attempts on Gerald Ford in 17 days. Some had clear motives, some had none. And in a few cases, even with all the evidence we have decades later, the official version still leaves real, unresolved questions. Today, 7 cases, real evidence, real history, and the questions historians are still asking. January 30th, 1835, the U.S. Capitol building. Andrew Jackson, 7th president, is walking out of a congressman's funeral. A man named Richard Lawrence steps forward, raises a pistol, and pulls the trigger. The pistol misfires. The percussion cap detonates. The powder doesn't ignite. Lawrence, undeterred, pulls a second fully loaded pistol from his coat. Same result: misfire. 2 pistols, both loaded. Both failed, at point-blank range. Jackson, 67 years old, did what only Andrew Jackson would do. He attacked Lawrence with his walking cane until bystanders pulled them apart. Among those bystanders, Davy Crockett. He helped subdue the gunman. Here's where it gets strange. Both pistols were later tested. Both fired flawlessly. The Smithsonian Institution would later calculate the probability of 2 consecutive misfires from those weapons at the time as roughly 1 in 125,000. A coincidence so unlikely Jackson himself believed God had intervened. The shooter, Richard Lawrence, a house painter from England, believed he was the rightful heir to the British throne and that Jackson was preventing him from claiming it. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, the first such verdict in U.S. legal history. Was it luck, faulty manufacturing, a historical anomaly that statistics can't explain? Even today, historians don't fully agree. April 14, 1865, 5 days after the surrender of the Confederate Army, President Abraham Lincoln attends a play at Ford's Theater. The war is over. The country is exhaling. At 10:15 p.m., John Wilkes Booth, Confederate sympathizer, stage actor, fame seeker, opens the door to the presidential box and fires a single shot. But here's the part most people don't know. Booth wasn't alone. The same night, at almost the same hour, 2 other coordinated attacks unfolded in Washington. The plan was to behead the United States government. 3 targets, 1 night. Lewis Powell, a Confederate veteran, forced his way into the home of Secretary of State William Seward. Stabbed Seward repeatedly. Seward survived only because a metal neck brace, worn from a recent carriage accident, deflected the blade. George Atzerodt, assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson, went to Johnson's hotel, sat in the bar, drank for several hours, and lost his nerve. He never went upstairs. That cowardice changed American history. Johnson became president the next morning. Booth was tracked down and shot in a Virginia barn 12 days later. 4 of his co-conspirators were hanged that summer, including Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the U.S. federal government. The official record is clear. Lincoln's killing was a conspiracy. The open historical question, how far up the Confederate chain of command did it actually go? October 14, 1912, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Theodore Roosevelt, former president, now running again on the Bull Moose ticket, is leaving the Hotel Gilpatrick for a campaign speech. He stands up in his open car to wave at the crowd. A man steps forward and fires a Colt revolver at point-blank range. The bullet hits Roosevelt in the chest, but before it reaches him, it passes through a steel eyeglass case in his coat pocket, and then through a folded 50-page manuscript of the speech he was about to deliver. Both objects slow the round just enough that it lodges in muscle, instead of piercing the lung. What happens next has no equal in American political history. Roosevelt, a trained anatomist from his hunting expeditions, checks himself for blood in his mouth. There is none. He concludes the bullet hasn't reached his lung. He refuses the hospital. He goes to the auditorium, and he delivers an 84-minute speech with the bullet still inside his chest. He opened with this, quote, "Friends, I shall ask you to be as quiet as possible. I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." He opened his vest. The crowd saw the blood. He spoke for 84 more minutes. The shooter, John Schrank, claimed the ghost of William McKinley appeared in a dream and ordered him to avenge McKinley's assassination. 5 psychiatrists declared him insane. He spent 29 years in a mental hospital and died there in 1943. The bullet was never removed. Roosevelt carried it in his chest for the rest of his life, 7 more years. November 1st, 1950. The White House is closed for renovation. President Harry Truman is living across the street, at Blair House, the temporary residence usually reserved for visiting heads of state. The security perimeter is smaller, less protected, and 2 men knew it. Oscar Collazo and Griselio Torresola, Puerto Rican nationalists. 2 days earlier, the U.S. military had bombed and strafed the towns of Jayuya and Utuado in Puerto Rico, Torresola's hometown. The 2 men decided that the only way to bring world attention to the Puerto Rican independence movement was to kill the President of the United States. At 2:20 p.m., Truman is napping upstairs. The 2 attackers approach the building from opposite directions, drawing pistols at the front steps. What follows is the longest gunfight in Secret Service history. 30 seconds, 27 shots fired, 3 officers wounded. Truman, hearing the noise, walks to the upstairs window and is told to get back fast by an officer screaming from below. White House police officer Leslie Koffelt was shot 3 times in the chest by Torresola. Mortally wounded and bleeding out, Koffelt raised his weapon, took aim, and shot Torresola in the head. Koffelt died 4 hours later. To this day, he is the only officer of the White House police or Secret Service ever killed protecting a president from an assassination attempt. Collazo survived, was wounded, was convicted, was sentenced to death. Truman, the man he tried to kill, commuted the sentence to life in prison. In 1979, Jimmy Carter pardoned him. Collazo went home to Puerto Rico, lived another 15 years, died in 1994. Truman later said, "I wasn't in any danger, but it was a terrible thing to have one of the finest fellows you ever knew murdered outright." The man at the gun, the man at the window, 2 ends of one country's tension. November 22, 1963, 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas. President John F. Kennedy is in the back of an open Lincoln limousine, riding through downtown Dallas with First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. Texas Governor John Connally is in the seat in front of them. 3 shots ring out in roughly 6 seconds. Within an hour, Kennedy is dead at Parkland Hospital. Within 90 minutes, a 24-year-old former Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested for the murder of a Dallas police officer named J.D. Tippit. By that evening, he is also charged with the murder of the President of the United States. 2 days later, while being transferred between jails on live television, Oswald is shot in the stomach by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner. Oswald dies without ever standing trial, without ever testifying, without ever explaining anything. The chief witness is silenced inside 48 hours of the shooting. The Warren Commission was appointed by President Lyndon Johnson within a week. It investigated for 10 months. Its conclusion, released September 1964. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. 3 shots. Single gunman, 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. 26 volumes of evidence. Case closed. Then in 1979, 15 years later, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the case. Their conclusion was different. They wrote, quote, "Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy." Their basis was acoustic evidence from a Dallas police dispatcher's recording, suggesting 4 shots, 1 possibly from the grassy knoll. In 1982, the National Academy of Sciences reviewed that acoustic evidence and disputed it. So we have 2 official US government investigations. They reach different conclusions. That alone is unusual. After the JFK Records Act of 1992, the National Archives began declassifying the case files. The releases continued. 2017, 2018, as recently as 2023. Each release was thousands of pages. Most confirmed what we knew, some raised new questions. Many are still partially redacted today. Here is the honest summary. The evidence that Oswald fired at the president is overwhelming. He was in the building. The rifle was his. His palm print was on it. What's still genuinely debated by serious historians, not conspiracy authors, professional historians, is whether anyone else was involved. The official answer has changed depending on which government body you ask. 60 years later, the question hasn't fully closed, and maybe it never will. September 5th, 1975, Sacramento, California. President Gerald Ford is walking through a public plaza near the state capitol on his way to meet the governor of California, Jerry Brown. A 26-year-old woman in a long red robe steps out of the crowd. She raises a Colt .45 pistol, 6 feet from the president. Her name was Lynette Fromm, nicknamed Squeaky, a devoted member of the Manson family, Charles Manson's commune. She was attempting to assassinate Ford to draw national attention to environmental causes Manson believed in. She pulled the trigger. The pistol didn't fire. There was a round in the magazine, but no round in the chamber. A Secret Service agent tackled her before she could rack the slide. Now here is the unsettling part. 17 days later, September 22nd, Ford is in San Francisco, outside the St. Francis Hotel, walking to his limousine. A 45-year-old woman in the crowd, named Sarah Jane Moore, raises a .38 revolver. She fires. A bystander, Oliver Sipple, a former Marine, saw the gun, lunged and struck her arm. The bullet went wide, ricocheted off the hotel wall, and wounded a taxi driver standing nearby. A second shot was prevented entirely. Without Sipple, Ford very likely dies that day. Moore had her own strange story. She had been an FBI informant on radical groups. Days before the shooting, she told her FBI contact she might do something violent. The FBI deemed her not a credible threat. The next day, she shot at the President of the United States. 2 attempts, 17 days, 2 women, 1 state. Coincidence or pattern? Historians still don't know. March 30th, 1981, 2:27 p.m., outside the Washington Hilton. President Ronald Reagan has just delivered a speech to a labor union and is walking 30 feet across the sidewalk to his armored limousine. A 25-year-old man named John Hinckley Jr. steps out of the press line. He fires 6 rounds in 1.7 seconds. 4 people are hit. Press Secretary James Brady, shot in the head. DC Police Officer Thomas Delahanty, neck. Secret Service Agent Tim McCarthy, chest. He had stepped in front of Reagan deliberately, taking the shot. The 6th bullet, the one that hits Reagan, ricochets off the limousine, enters under his left arm, passes through a lung, and stops 1 inch from his heart. Reagan walks into the emergency room under his own power, collapses inside. He survived because his Secret Service detail decided to drive directly to George Washington University Hospital instead of returning to the White House. That decision saved his life. To the surgeons before they operated, Reagan reportedly said, "I hope you're all Republicans." And here is where the story turns strange. The shooter, John Hinckley Jr., had no political motive. He had no grievance against Reagan. He shot the president to impress an 18-year-old college student named Jodie Foster, an actress he had become obsessed with after watching the film Taxi Driver. He believed shooting a president would make her notice him. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent 41 years in psychiatric institutions and supervised release. In 2022, he was unconditionally released. He now lives publicly, posts music online, and gives interviews. The man who shot a president walks free. The motive most resistant to explanation isn't political. It isn't ideological. It's a delusion no investigator could have predicted. 146 years between Jackson and Reagan. 7 serious attempts. 3 killed presidents. 4 survivors. Some by inches, some by chance, some by individual heroism. Now look at the motives. Political ideology, mental illness, cult devotion, personal obsession. The reasons are wildly different. The pattern they share isn't ideology, it's individual willingness to kill a president. And each time it's happened, the country found a new way to be unprepared for it. And every reform in presidential security came after a tragedy, not before. The Secret Service was formed in 1865 to fight currency counterfeiting. They were assigned to protect the president only after McKinley was assassinated in 1901. Armored limousines became standard after Kennedy. Modern Secret Service protocols came after Reagan. The protections were always built backwards, from hindsight. The presidency is the most protected job on earth. The history of the office shows that's still not quite enough. Some questions are settled. Lincoln died from Booth's bullet. Roosevelt was shot by Schrank. Reagan by Hinckley. Other questions are disputed. The full extent of Lincoln's conspiracy, whether Oswald acted entirely alone, why the FBI ignored Sarah Jane Moore's warning, and some answers, 6 decades after Dealey Plaza, are still classified inside the National Archives. What separates serious history from conspiracy theory isn't the willingness to ask questions. It's the discipline to hold two things at once: the official record, where it's solid, and the genuine unresolved questions, where the record has gaps. Both are part of the truth. The history of presidential assassinations isn't a story about conspiracies. It's a story about how thin the line is between order and a single second of catastrophe. 7 cases, 2 misfired pistols in 1835, a coordinated attack on 3 branches of government in 1865, a bullet stopped by a steel eyeglass case, and a folded speech in 1912. The longest gunfight in Secret Service history at Truman's front door in 1950. A killing in Dallas that 2 government investigations couldn't agree on. 2 attempts on Gerald Ford in 17 days. And a man in 1981 who shot a president to impress an actress he had never met. The job hasn't gotten safer. The threats haven't gotten simpler. And the questions about every one of these cases haven't fully closed.